Terraria is a huge game filled with tons of content, and a lot of it is annoying, very annoying. So today we're going to be talking about just that, the most annoying things in Terraria. We're going to start off with things that are mildly irritating, and then we're going to work our way up to the worst things about the game. Let's get started. Number 1, bats. This is pretty simple. Bats are arguably the most annoying kind of enemy in the entire game by a landslide. They're everywhere, it's often hard to spot them, it's even harder to hit them, and they don't really drop anything. It's hard to find any justification for them even being in the game. It seems like they're always just there, creeping in the shadows, waiting to show up at the worst time. Honestly, if bats were removed from Terraria, it would probably have a positive impact on the game. Number 2, accidental boss summons. Nothing is worse than accidentally summoning a boss in Terraria, especially when you aren't prepared for it at all. Killing a voodoo demon and spawning the wall of flesh, accidentally hitting a prismatic lacewing and summoning the Empress of Light, swinging your pickaxe and then summoning Queen Bee. It is surprisingly easy to summon a few bosses on accident if you aren't careful. It's especially frustrating when you're carrying around a lot of money on a higher difficulty when getting killed by a boss can be a huge inconvenience. At that point, you might as well just leave the game and then come back in so that you don't lose your money. Number 3, underground traps. This only really matters in the early game, but getting hit by a dart trap or dying to a boulder is pretty embarrassing and, more importantly, pretty annoying. Sometimes it feels like there's genuinely nothing you can do. A pressure plate can blend in so well with the background. When going mining, you have to pay such close attention to the floor at all times and have decent lighting just to make sure you don't get hit by a trap. I mean, a boulder can straight up just kill you in one hit by the time you even react to it. Unfortunately, traps aren't just annoying at the beginning though. The jungle temple and dungeon are also full of them, and it's just as frustrating there, arguably even worse. If you're like me and you hate traps, I would definitely suggest using the No Traps World Seed. You poor soul. Number 4, NPC happiness. I do not like this system at all. I think it's fine for pylons since they're really useful and you should need to earn them in some way since they're so convenient. The problem is really item pricing. NPCs will start selling their items at a significantly higher price if they're put in conditions they don't like. So if they're nearby other villagers they dislike, in a biome they find uncomfortable, or they're around too many other NPCs in general, they will raise their prices. This is just very unnecessary. The idea was clearly to try and incentivize players to spread out their towns all around the world so that NPCs could be more spread out, but it does more harm than good. If somebody really wants to build a giant hotel for every single NPC in the middle of the world spawn, that shouldn't be punished with higher prices. Not getting the fast travel with pylons is a fair enough trade-off already. Although to be fair to Terraria, this system was a lot more punishing back when 1.4 initially released, so luckily it's not really a big deal anymore. Number 5, Plantera bulbs. I've always hated the fact that there's no craftable summon for Plantera. The novelty of breaking a bulb to summon it is cool, but not having any other method to summon the boss is just annoying. It should be like Queen Bee, where there's an obvious intended way to spawn the boss, but there's also a craftable item to do so if you want to go out of your way to get it. My issue with Plantera bulbs is that you kind of have to center your entire underground jungle arena around them. If you build a huge arena next to a bulb and then die to Plantera, now you likely have a giant arena without any way to spawn the boss anywhere nearby. So you need to find another bulb and then either carve out an entire new arena or build a giant tunnel leading back to your previous one. Sometimes you might get lucky and find 2 bulbs right next to each other, but that doesn't mean the problem just goes away. It's not a problem at all if you beat Plantera first try either, but on harder difficulties where you'll probably die to the boss once or twice, the bulbs can be very irritating. Number 6, reforge prices. Back in my day, you would pay 2 gold coins to get warding on your fishron wings, and these days you pay 3 platinum coins to get trash reforges 30 times in a row. Jokes aside, everybody kinda hates reforge prices in Terraria for a reason. The Goblin Tinkerer is a fantastic NPC and he probably provides the most value out of any character in the game. But that doesn't change how ridiculous it is to pay 16 gold coins per reforge for pixie wings. Obviously reforges need to be a tiny bit pricey. Getting warding or menacing on your gear makes a huge difference and makes your character way stronger, so obviously it needs to have some challenge to get there. With that being said, the current prices you pay for good reforges on accessories is just absurd. I'm not really caught up with 1.4.5, but from what I've heard, there will be some changes coming to reforges in that update. Thank goodness. Number 7, biome spread. This mechanic is so frustrating that one of my most popular videos ever is just me complaining about it. In retrospect, it's definitely not the worst mechanic in the entire game, but I would be lying if I said that biome spread doesn't still annoy me. A lot. The worst case scenario is when you defeat the wall of flesh and the corruption immediately gets sent to your jungle. It's harder harder to summon Plantera later in the game, harder to obtain chlorophyte, and grinding jungle enemies as well just takes a longer time. I have no idea why, but this has happened to me multiple times just over the past few months. I don't know if something's changed or if I've just been getting unlucky. I get that biome spread provides a decent challenge for the player and pushes them to progress. At the same time, I feel like the jungle should definitely be immune, or at the very least, the corruption should spread to it slower than it does right now. Whenever I start a new playthrough and then reach the jungle and see it right next to the corruption, it straight up makes me want to quit and start over. Biome spread is simply a huge inconvenience and there's no getting around it. Number 8. Random invasions. In my opinion, any mechanic that forcefully distracts the player and wastes time that cannot be prevented is a bad part of the game, and random invasions are that mechanic. There is simply no way to avoid some events in Terraria. I can't even count how many times I've been one shadow orb away from fighting the Eater of Worlds just to see a goblin army is approaching. A lot of these events don't even have any useful items for the player, so all they do is waste time. Look at the pirate invasion. It's a good way to farm money, but if somebody already has all the money they need, there is no real reason to participate in this event. It doesn't matter if you want to participate though, since it can randomly show up in your world. Events like the Old One's Army are so much better, simply because the player can choose whether or not they want to do it. The Blood Moon, Goblin Army, Pirate Invasion, Solar Eclipse, enough. Even Martian Madness is pretty irritating at times, and that's my favorite event in the entire game. You can kill the probe easily if you're paying attention, but if you're just building or you don't react fast enough, you'll get spotted before being able to successfully kill the drone, summoning this long, frustrating event. Invasions in themselves aren't really a problem in Terraria. You can get very good loot from events like Martian Madness and the Goblin Invasion. The problem is that more times than not, it's forced on you instead of by your own choice. Number 9. Enemies during boss fights. What do I mean by this exactly? Oftentimes when you're fighting a boss in the overworld, especially early in the game, you can be interrupted by random enemies who have nothing to do with the fight. This doesn't sound like a big problem on the surface, but I've died to bosses in this game many times because of this. I'll give you an example. Recently I've been playing more of the Terraria mod and I reached Skeletron. The thing with expert mode Skeletron is that his attacks are really easy to predict and dodge, but they're also very punishing and do a lot of damage if you mess up. I was doing just fine in this fight for a while, but more and more I was getting attacked by random enemies that I couldn't even see because it was so dark. Right here I get hit by a demon eye, causing me to take a bunch of damage, and then less than 5 seconds later some random Eater of Soul comes in, launching me directly into Skeletron's head, leading to me losing the fight. What you just witnessed is actually what sparked the idea for this entire video. I can't even begin to describe how frustrating it was to lose such a close battle because some random, weak enemy showed up out of nowhere. This obviously isn't the only time this has happened either, and it's not just with Skeletron. The solution to this is pretty obvious. I think there should be a change where enemies don't just spawn while you're in the middle of a boss fight. It doesn't contribute to the fight at all, and it just leads to very irritating deaths. And that's where this video comes to a close. I would love to hear what you guys think is really annoying about Terraria in the comments, and always remember, it's still a great game. Bye-bye.